Welcome back to the next video, and we're now going to go into the core components of an effective prompt. In fact, we're going to be over this video and the next two videos, we're going to go deep into this area here. These are all the things to consider when you are building a great prompt. It looks overwhelming. Please don't worry. We're going to go through and I'm going to walk you through step by step each of the various elements. We're going to look in this video at the essential components. In the next video, we're going to go deep on response formats. And then after that, we'll get into the advanced stuff. And what I'm also going to be talking about, and you'll find it in the workbook, is I'm a big fan of having templates with fill in the blanks to help guide us. And I'm going to also walk through this particular template and show you how we would apply this to a particular prompt. Now, again, it looks overwhelming. Please do not get overwhelmed. We're going to build this up slowly. Also, you do not need to always create huge, great, long prompts. It really depends upon the importance of the task that you are carrying out. Sometimes you just want a quick answer, something fairly simple, and so just firing off a quick one-sentence prompt will sometimes be okay. But if you're going to be doing a task where it's either extremely important, like creating a research report around tax planning for a client, or you want to create a prompt that you're going to reuse over and over again for a frequently recurring task, in both of those situations, I would recommend spending a bit of time on crafting a great prompt. Because if it's critical, you're going to want a great response. And if it's something that's going to be recurring, then again, spending some time creating a great prompt gives you something that you can use over and over again to save you huge amounts of time. And you'll see exactly what I mean as we go through a worked example. So that's the main point on this template prompt. Please don't feel overwhelmed, and it does not mean you always have to have long, detailed prompts. So let's talk about just a few, before we dive into those essential components, I want to just look at some of the bigger picture things to consider when we are creating our prompts. So firstly, always just be careful with personal data, personal information. Now, I'm not going to go deep at this stage into security and privacy within ChatGPT. You'll need to create your own policies within your firm. However, OpenAI has proven to be a responsible company. There hasn't been any data breaches for over a year that I'm aware of. There was one in the early days, but they soon fixed it. And although they want to use your prompts to train the model, firstly, you can opt out of that, or you can go for a team account where it's not used to train the model. I have a team account, I pay for that, and for me, it's definitely worth it. But I'm not particularly worried too much about the data. However, what you might want to do, and they have said, for example, when you upload files, when you put knowledge into any GPTs, then that is not being used to train the data, and so it's kept confidential. You'll need to make sure you're happy with that. You can go onto OpenAI's website or whichever large language model you're using and have a read through their privacy and security policies and decide what's right for you. But I would suggest at least apply some common sense. So, for example, if I am creating a prompt where I'm going to ask it to analyze the financial data of a client, then it's a good idea perhaps to remove the client's name so the numbers are anonymous. So be careful about personal data. It's something that OpenAI have a pretty good track record, but do check the privacy and security of the specific large language model that you want to use if you're going to give it personal data, either about yourself or your clients. Okay, a general point about prompts is you want to be very specific and clear. The more clear you are, the better the response you are going to get. I always suggest when you are talking to a large language model, think of it just like talking to a real person. If you don't give clear instructions, then very often you don't get the result that you're looking for when you delegate to somebody like a team member. So we have to have that same specificity and clarity in our prompts. Also, you can always refine your prompts if needed, so it doesn't have to be perfect first time around. For example, you could have a follow-up that says, can you make it seem a little less formal and add some humor? And that's one of the things I love about ChatGPT is it's different from traditional search engines where if you search for something and then you do a second search, the second search doesn't know what the first search was. They're all independent. But in the context of a chat in a large language model, then you can follow up with further requests, but it knows what happened in the earlier request. And we'll talk more about that in the later video when we look at how we can really use follow-up prompts really well. The other thing that we can do, and again, we'll look at this later, is sometimes you'll want to create multiple prompts and combine the outputs. If you really go into advanced prompt engineering, you'll hear lots of terms like one-shot prompting, few-shot prompting, chain of thought, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But essentially, when you are crafting your prompts, sometimes you might want to create a single prompt that gives you the exact result you want first time around, called one-shot prompting. Sometimes you might want to use chain of thoughts, where you build up your prompts, have multiple prompts, and then what you do at the end is you combine the outputs into the result you're looking for. We'll look at an example of that later on. It'll make more sense. Another little tip is keep related things in one chat. So if you've got things that are related, remember that ChatGPT does remember what you said in the earlier parts of the conversation. And so you can build up and build up. Once you've got it to come up with something like, for example, you might use it to analyze the benefits of your service offering, then it'll remember that. So later on in the chat, we could use that to perhaps write some marketing copy. Again, I'm going to give you an example of that later on in the course, but the general point is keep a chat going for things that are related. And if it's unrelated, start a brand new chat. And then a last little general tip is, and we'll talk about this when we look at the weaknesses later, but just remember one of the limitations is human bias, also hallucination. We'll talk about that later. And so we should always use our professional judgment to decide to what extent the result we are happy with. We should not just simply take a response and then just send it off to a client, for example, without reading it. So, for example, I have a prompt I use to answer emails. And it's brilliant. It saves me so much time answering emails, but I wouldn't dream of then just simply copying and pasting and sending it off without reading it first. So always check you're happy with things. And if it's something particularly important where it's referring to things like tax legislation, then go and just check that it is picking up the right thing. And we'll talk about that later. When we talk about the limitations, I will show you some of the things you can build into your prompts to, for example, get ChatGPT to let you know its citations, where its sources have come from. Okay, there's a few foundational stuff. Let's now dive into this first step of the core components, the essential components. And so we're going to look at these, and then what we're going to do is we're going to combine these into a prompt template that you can use. Here's a quick sneak preview. Here's the prompt template, which we'll go through, and I'm going to give you a worked example very soon in ChatGPT to demonstrate how we might use this. Okay, so I'm going to take this slightly out of order. I'm going to start with the first one being task. The task is simply, what do we want ChatGPT to do?